I just have one slight concern, and that is using institutions like St George's, like Summerhill, as models of some kind, as a kind of reference point, when you're in fact talking about education in a whole community, in a whole society, and that the issues that the amount of time children spend anyway in school is limited, extremely limited, even though the present government is extending it apparently from 3 to 19. But given that there are different reasons for that, what I'm just raising as a concern is that there are certain principles teachers can be given, certain ideas which can be shared, but in the end, the school is there to provide a kind of support to individuals and children which fit their needs and their requirements. And the needs and requirements when St George's was operational, and which you're dealing with as an active educator within this community, are very, very different.
I think the problem with change in our education system is that it hasn't reference models. I think it tends to reference case studies that fit within the systems that they are as they are now. And as a result, you don't get off-the-wall thinking. As a result, you don't get to address the questions they ask repeatedly throughout the last 40, 50 years have been repeatedly the same. And then this word innovation comes up, and they discuss it about innovation within the school. And they don't. The models allow us to look at what worked within their historical context, and then to learn from that. And one thing about education is that I thought that's how we learnt. And I get really confused when people say within the school context, with teacher training or within the philosophy of education, we shouldn't do that. We should somehow think about it in a different way. I also do think that the values that we have today and the issues we have today about human rights, about identity, about community, and I think those are fully addressed by, or not fully addressed, they're sought to be fully addressed by models like Summerhill, like Robert Owen, like Alexander Bloom. I think the issues that we're addressing then are the most important issues we have to address now. In Tower Hamlets, community cohesion, or the sense of identity and community, what are our individual children growing up to be, is a major issue within Tower Hamlets. And I think Alexander Bloom and Summerhill and the other schools actually allow teachers and children, I want the children to do it. I really would rather have the children do it than the teachers. And I'd really rather have the children say to their teachers, look, why haven't I got a school council that gives me a voice? Why is it meeting only once a month? And why is it that the head keeps on saying no? Or why is it we're only doing project work? Or why don't we have a constitution? When the American president comes up, he does his oath of office, he's pledging to a constitution. It's like, well, that must be important for this world leader, something called a constitution. Why haven't I got one? Why do you talk about politics and citizenship in schools without giving me any of the tools as a child, or the attitudes and the values as a child to become an active, positive citizen?
Can Jane, would you like to respond to James's question? I mean, there's the idea of treating somewhere like Summerhill or St George's as a kind of eternal model.
I do agree with you in the sense that I think it can be problematic with perhaps with one sort of model, but I also very strongly agree with you about the sense of learning from history and having more, because a greater knowledge of what's gone before and what alternate possibilities there were and still might be.
Okay, Michael Fielding. So.
I think examples of schools that have actually put into practice a radically different way of educating young people is very important. And I accept entirely James's point about context being different. But two things really. First of all, I think you have to go back to values and principles and look at the kind of values and principles that either Alex Bloom or A.S.Neill or whoever one admires in some sense. So what were they fundamentally getting at? What were they trying to do? And then, to take James's point, to say, take those values and say, okay, in our context now, what might we do? So you take their values and you apply them in the new context.
Michael Newman, 30 seconds.
I just want to say that I wasn't saying every school should be like Summerhill or like Alexander Bloom's St George's. What I think is that with values and the debate of values in education, it's very easy just to impose values and say, well, that won't work. It's like, well, hold on, 1945 to 55, that did work. Let's look at what, the fact that people dismiss the radical. They dismiss because they dismiss the history of the radical. And I think we've got to show to our children, and let's not do it just, let's get with the children and show to children that they have a radical history that they can learn from about what schools are capable of doing. What if children had rights in schools? What if children had a true voice? What if children had a cooperative community? How would that be? What would it look like? We can see some examples. Yeah?
Can the ethos of an Alexander Bloom really kind of fit into a secondary system in this day and age? Wouldn't it more likely be fitting into a primary system? Michael Newman.
I think there's a lot against someone like Alexander Bloom working within the secondary system as it is now. And I think the primary system is worse than it was. The primary system has inherited the examination ethos and the subject ethos, and now things are changing because of the new curriculum and things. But I think it'd be an uphill struggle. I think also the worrying thing is the values that Alexander Bloom fought for and displayed. They're now slot into time slots and targets and things like that. And I think as a result, they're probably corrupted and perverted. So even when we have wonderful case studies within our schools of children's voice, my question would be, well, what values are they really learning? Because they're learning it within a system that I think is children's voice is an anathema.
30 seconds.
I agree. I think it'd be incredibly difficult.
In both secondary and primary.
Yes, actually,
Okay.
because yeah.
James, can I have James first? James.
Very briefly, yes, I actually...
30 seconds, James.
Alex Bloom, no. Principles, though, which are very well articulated. I'm going to ask that question because it was a bit dodgy one, I thought. But all the answers we got, I think, were effective, but they circled around certain basic principles, which are very well articulated at the end by Michael, about schools. Sitting next to me is my daughter, who is working in a further education college, CNWL, and her colleague. And I think Effie, for example, had it existed in the way, in many ways it is now, it would have been wonderful to have keyed in with what we were doing at St George's. And I think that it's about education and the institutions that are here now and able to reflect some of these values that we should be focusing. Agreed, the case studies are helpful in doing that.
So, Alf, do you want to say? Can I just before Michael, because I know you'll be a good summariser. Alf?
At the time, I didn't think I was going to an unusual school, although now I do realise that. And obviously, I'd like to see some schools now adopting Alex Bloom's policies, if possible.
Michael?
I disagree with you fundamentally. I think that, not with Alf, with you, but in the sense that my teaching career has been, luckily, at least half of it has been spent in schools that have aspired to do the kinds of things that Alex Bloom, and they are secondary schools. I do think there is a strong tradition, though again we suffer from this terrible amnesia. We have to remember the Alex Blooms of this world, and he's not the only person, there's other people as well. We have to remember it. And I can think of at least 2 secondary schools in England right now who are in their own small way trying to do what Alex Bloom did between 1945 and 1955.
That's good to hear. So we're running a little bit late, but we came up for 2:05 for the film and the program this afternoon. Thank you very, very much, all of you.